Hello, I'm Gloria. And what happened at the bank changed everything. My daughter-in-law smirked at me, calling me a poor woman, thinking she had the upper hand. But what she didn't expect. When I signed the paper, her card got declined. You won't believe the shock on her face. All these years, they thought they could control me, take what's mine. But today, I stood my ground. The lies, the betrayal, they've pushed me too far. The truth is about to hit harder than ever. How far will they go to keep their secrets? You won't believe the twist that's coming. I walked into the bank on a quiet weekday morning, the kind of day where everything feels a little too still. The clouds hung heavy, casting a dull grey over the streets of our middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. It was one of those days when you can feel a storm brewing, though you can't quite name the cause. I wasn't just here to check on my account. I was here to confront something that had been gnawing at me for weeks, maybe months, or maybe even years. The glass doors closed behind me with a soft click, and I could already feel my heart racing. I had always been good at keeping my composure, years of practice, I suppose. But today, everything felt different. I could already feel the tension in my chest. The polite young bank clerk, Michael, gave me a hesitant smile as he greeted me, his eyes just a little too cautious. I wondered if he knew why I was here. He directed me to a seat near the counter, and I did as I was told. There wasn't much else to do but wait. But my mind was far from calm. It was swirling with questions, most of which I didn't have answers to. Why had my son, Jalen, asked the bank to close my account? Why was I being called in for this meeting, and what was really going on behind the scenes? As I sat there, watching Michael shuffle papers behind the counter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A quiet unease settled deep in my bones. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Whatever was about to happen, I would face it head on. I always had before. Michael finally approached, holding a document in his hands. He paused for a moment before handing it to me. His fingers trembled slightly, but he quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Mrs. Johnson, your son, Mr. Jalen, tried to close your account yesterday," he said, his voice slightly strained. "We didn't process anything, but we need your signature to proceed with the changes." I took the paper from him, feeling the weight of it in my hands. The words on the page seemed to blur for a moment, as if my mind couldn't quite make sense of what was happening. Why would Jalen want to do that? I thought, my thoughts racing. This wasn't just some simple banking procedure. It felt like a betrayal one that was quietly unfolding right before my eyes. But I didn't show it. I kept my face steady, though I could feel the muscles in my jaw tightening. I didn't trust myself to speak just yet. Instead, I focused on the document in my hands, trying to gather my thoughts. Michael didn't seem to notice the storm swirling inside me. He simply waited, his eyes flicking back and forth between me and the paper. And then it happened. My fingers brushed over the bottom of the page, and I saw the name there, Jalen's name. It hit me like a punch to the gut. The document wasn't just a request to close my account, it was a forged power of attorney. My son had done this. He had made an attempt to take control of my finances, to cut me out of my own life's work. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning, trying to wrap around the reality of what was happening. How could he do this to me? After everything I had done for him, for this family, I felt a deep, cold rage beginning to rise within me, but I didn't let it show. Not yet. Instead, I looked up at Michael, my voice steady, though my heart was thundering in my chest. "You want me to sign this?" I asked. My tone even, but inside I was seething. Michael nodded, his expression barely masking his nervousness. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson, we just need your signature to proceed." I couldn't bring myself to speak for a moment. My mind was too clouded with disbelief. How could my own flesh and blood do this to me? I had worked so hard to give him a good life. I had sacrificed everything. My own dreams, my health, my happiness, all for the sake of my family. And this was how he repaid me. But as I looked at the paper again, I realized something. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. This was about power. And for the first time in my life, I realized that my power had been taken from me without me even noticing. I took the pen from the desk. My hand trembled slightly, but I steadied myself. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let him have control over me anymore. With a deep breath, I signed the document. The moment I did, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't the weight of defeat. It was the weight of something much bigger, a choice. I had chosen to take control, not in the way I wanted, but in the way that would protect me. I handed the signed document back to Michael, my hands steady now, my resolve hardening. He looked at me, still nervous, unsure of what to make of my calmness in the face of the situation. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice faltering. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I stood up and walked toward the door, the weight of the decision settling over me. The storm inside me hadn't calmed, it had just changed. Now, it was a storm of purpose. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt alive. I felt like I was finally awake. The world around me continued to move, but I was no longer just watching it pass by. I was part of it again. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years. "It's time," I said when the call was answered. My voice was firm, like I was giving an order. "I need you to help me. It's time to rewrite my will." The line went dead, and I walked to my car, feeling a sense of finality in every step. I wasn't going to let anyone push me aside anymore. And as I sat in the car, watching the city unfold before me, I knew this was just the beginning. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the paper in front of me. The weight of it felt heavier than just a few pages, like it was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in my life. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the quiet in my house was deafening. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background, a sound that should have been soothing but instead felt like a reminder of the loneliness that had crept into my life. Yesterday's decision weighed on me more than I expected. I had signed the paper without truly understanding all the implications, but today the reality of it was settling in. My son, Jalen, had made me feel small. He had used me, taken my trust, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. How had I let this happen? I ran my fingers over the form again, tracing the lines of the signature I'd written the day before. Was it too late? Could I take it back? The truth was, I had known something was wrong, but I had ignored the signs. I had always put my family first, no matter what, but had they ever truly seen me? Did they ever truly appreciate me? My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Tasha again, calling for the 4th time since the incident at the bank. I knew what she wanted, answers. But I didn't have any answers to give her. I wasn't ready to face her or anyone else, for that matter. I didn't have the strength to be polite, to play the part of the mother they all expected me to be. I let the phone ring out, and the house fell back into silence. The sound of a car pulling up in front of my house pulled me from my thoughts. I could feel my heart skip a beat. I knew who it was before I even saw her. Tasha. She stepped out of the car, carrying a grocery bag in one hand. Her usual cheerful demeanor was forced, like she was trying to cover something up. I didn't want to deal with her today, not yet. But when she rang the doorbell, I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. I opened the door, and she stepped inside like everything was normal. "Mom, I heard you sign the papers at the bank. Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Her voice was a little too sweet, a little too defensive. I glanced at her, my eyes narrowing. "What are you really here for, Tasha?" I asked, my voice steady, though I could feel the tension building inside me. She hesitated for a moment, then set the groceries down on the counter. "Mom, I'm just concerned. I mean, it's a big decision. Are you sure Jalen hasn't had the best intentions?" Her words didn't sit right with me. There was a tone in her voice that suggested she wasn't just concerned, she was trying to manipulate me. I could feel it. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. Not this time. "I've been doing things for my children my entire life," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "And now, for once, it's time to think about me." Tasha's eyes flicked to the bag of groceries, but she didn't respond. Instead, she let a silence fall between us, and I knew that she was waiting for me to break. But I didn't. Then, as if it were a slip of the tongue, she dropped the bomb. "You know, we've been setting everything up for Jalen's future. He's just trying to make sure you're taken care of." The words hit me like a slap to the face. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. This wasn't just about the bank anymore. This was part of something bigger, something that had been planned without me, behind my back. I had been used, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. Later that evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the old photographs scattered across the coffee table. Images of my children growing up, of Jalen when he was just a boy, full of hope and promise. I thought about the late nights I spent working 2 jobs, about the sacrifices I made so they could have what I didn't. My dreams were put on hold, buried under the weight of motherhood. And now? Now, It felt like all of it had been in vain. I could hear Ray's voice in my head, clear as day, from a conversation we'd had years ago. "You've done enough, Gloria, but they won't appreciate it until it's too late." I closed my eyes, the sting of those words cutting through me. He had known. He had seen what I couldn't, how they would take and never give back. How my love, my sacrifice, had become nothing more than an expectation. I couldn't change the past, but I could change the future. I had to know the truth, and there was only one way to get it. I needed to talk to Jalen. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. The familiar weight of the call hanging in the air. He answered after the second ring. "Hey, Mom." His voice was flat, distant. "Jalen, why would you try to close my account? Why would you do this to me?" I couldn't keep the hurt from creeping into my voice. There was a pause on the other end. "Mom, I was just trying to help you. You're getting older, and I thought it was time to manage things for you." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him I didn't need his help, that I didn't need him controlling everything in my life. But I stayed calm. I couldn't let him see how much his words were cutting through me. "Jalen, you don't get to make decisions for me. Not like this. Not without my say." There was a silence, and then I heard him sigh. "I'm just looking out for you, Mum." That was when I knew he wasn't looking out for me. He was looking out for himself. The money, the power, everything that came with controlling me. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I hadn't really looked at myself in a long time, not truly. For years I had been so caught up in everyone else that I forgot what it was like to take care of me. But now I was done. I wasn't going to let Jalen or anyone else dictate my life anymore. I had spent too long putting others first. It was time to change that. "I've spent too long being the one they lean on," I said aloud to my reflection. "Now it's my turn." I made up my mind then. I was going to protect myself, my future. And the first step was hiring a lawyer. I wasn't going to let them push me around any longer. Just as I was about to make the call, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there stood Tasha again. She handed me an envelope, a serious look on her face. "You need to read this," she said. "It's important." I opened the letter, my hands trembling as I read the contents. It was from a lawyer. The letter detailed a hidden trust fund I had no idea existed. But what really caught my attention was the last line. It mentioned something about Jalen, something he had been hiding from me for years. The shock hit me hard, and I stood there for a moment, trying to process it. The trust fund could change everything for me, but the revelation about Jalen, it was going to force me to confront even darker truths. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. This was the beginning of taking back control of my life. The afternoon sun was low, casting a dim glow across the kitchen as I sat at the table, hands resting on the cold, hard surface. The weight of yesterday's decision still hung heavy in the air. I wasn't sure how to feel anymore. It had been a long time coming, but today was different. Today, I would confront Jalen. I could no longer hide from the truth, no longer pretend everything was okay. The betrayal was raw, and it was time to speak up. I couldn't help but replay the conversations I had with him over the years. How he always managed to charm his way out of difficult situations, how his smile would make me doubt my own judgment. I wasn't falling for it anymore. The lies had been exposed, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me any longer. I grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled down what I needed to say. Clear, concise, and to the point. No room for emotion. Just the facts. I couldn't afford to be weak in this moment. Mom, I raised you better than this, I muttered to myself. You will not destroy what I've built. With the words written down, I stood up, taking a deep breath. I was ready. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't answer. But I knew what had to be done. Jalen. The moment I opened the door, his familiar face greeted me his stance, as confident as ever. But there was a subtle shift in the air. Things were different now. I stepped aside, letting him in. He walked in, holding a bag of groceries, acting as though nothing was amiss, like he didn't just try to ruin my life. Mom, I heard you signed the papers at the bank. Are you sure you know what you're doing? His tone, usually so charming, was now defensive. It wasn't concern, it was manipulation. I crossed my arms, my eyes narrowing. We need to talk, Jalen. I know what you've been trying to do. He froze for a moment, as if caught off guard. I watched him carefully, feeling the tension build in my chest. Mom, it's not like that, he started, attempting to deflect the conversation. I was just trying to help you. You're getting older, and I thought it was time to manage things for you. The audacity. It wasn't about helping me, it was about control. About him getting his hands on my life's work, my legacy. I didn't flinch. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I wouldn't fight back? My voice was calm, but the anger behind it was undeniable. Jalen looked away, avoiding my gaze. For a moment, I saw him as the boy he once was, lost in his excuses, trying to make me believe he had good intentions. But I wasn't that fool anymore. As I stood there, listening to Jalen's feeble justifications, memories flooded back. I could see it now, the moment when I first lost control, when everything I had worked for became secondary to everyone else's needs. I remember the first time Jalen asked me for money, how he convinced me it was for something important, a school project. I gave him what I could, never questioning. Then, weeks later, I found out it was for something completely frivolous. Mom, I need this for school, he'd said, looking me in the eye like he had no idea what he was asking. And I, foolishly, didn't question him. It was the first time I let my instincts slip, the first time I ignored the feeling in my gut. And now, standing here, I saw that everything since then had been a series of manipulations, each one larger than the last. How did I let this happen? I whispered under my breath, my voice barely audible. But this was it. I wasn't going to let Jalen take anything else from me. Not my dignity, not my life's work, This conversation had gone beyond the bank papers. It was a battle for my self-respect. I turned to the drawer and pulled out the folder I had been keeping hidden. I opened it slowly, the rustling of the paper loud in the quiet room. The forged power of attorney, the bank documents, all the evidence I needed to show him that I wasn't as naive as he thought. "This is the last time you'll try to control me," I said, my voice steady and firm. "You won't be able to manipulate me anymore." Jalen's eyes widened. I could see the panic setting in as he glanced down at the papers in front of him. He wasn't expecting this. He wasn't expecting me to fight back. "You think I'm a fool?" I continued, a cold calm settling over me. "I've already taken steps to protect myself. You won't get your hands on my assets." I could feel the power shifting. For the first time in years, I was no longer the one being controlled. I wasn't the silent mother who took everything in stride. I was reclaiming what was mine. Jalen's face flushed with anger. His hands clenched into fists, but I didn't back down. I stood my ground. "You regret this, Mom," he spat, his voice full of frustration. "You're making a huge mistake." I didn't flinch. I didn't show any weakness. "No, Jalen, you've already made the mistake." He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The room fell silent, but the silence was different now. It wasn't oppressive, it was a victory. I had taken control. But even in the quiet of my own home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming, something bigger. My phone rang as I turned toward the door, a strange number flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" I asked, my voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. "Mrs. Johnson?" the voice on the other end said. "This is Stan from Pierce & Sons Law Firm. I have news that might change everything." My heart skipped a beat. The pieces were falling into place. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally in control. The phone rang, its shrill sound slicing through the quiet of my living room. I had barely sat down, still stewing over the conversation with Jalen. I knew something else was coming. I could feel it in my bones. When I saw the caller ID, my stomach tightened. It was my lawyer. I wasn't sure if this was going to be another round of bad news or the confirmation I needed that I was doing the right thing. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello? Mrs. Johnson?" The voice on the other end was calm, reassuring even. "It's Stan from Pierce & Sons Law Firm. I just wanted to update you on the legal steps we've taken." I sat up straighter. "Go ahead," I replied, my heart pounding. "Everything's in order. The will has been updated. We've secured your assets. The changes are official." Relief washed over me, but it wasn't a clean, easy kind of relief. No, this wasn't a win yet. It was just the first step in a battle I hadn't asked for, but was now forced to fight. I didn't say much after that. The conversation ended, and I sat there in silence. It was a quiet victory, but the weight of the coming confrontation with Jalen still pressed heavily on me. I had made the first move, but there was still so much left to do. The next day, just after breakfast, I heard the knock on the door. I knew it was coming. Jalen hadn't been in touch since our last talk, but I could feel his anger rising. When I opened the door, I was met with a familiar sight. My son, standing there, clutching a bag of groceries. For a second, I almost thought he might apologize, might recognize that things had gone too far, but I knew better. There was a hunger in his eyes now, a desperation to get his way. The smile he gave me didn't reach his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice shaky. "I heard you signed those papers. Are you sure you're thinking clearly about all this? You're throwing everything away." His tone was almost pleading, but I didn't let it soften me. I wasn't going to be manipulated by the same old act. "I know what you're trying to do, Jalen," I said, my voice steady. "You can't hide behind your excuses anymore." He flinched, but quickly regained his composure. "Mom, you're too old to handle this. I'm just trying to protect you, to make sure you're taken care of." "No, Jalen." I cut him off, feeling the anger surge up inside me. "You've always been about control. This isn't about me, it's about you. You've been using me for years, and I'm done letting you do it." He blinked, eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I shook my head. "You've been trying to control my finances, my life, everything. You thought you could just push me around like I'm some weak old woman, but you're wrong." He opened his mouth to respond, but I could already see the cracks in his mask. His argument was falling apart, and he knew it. As Jalen tried to justify his actions, I couldn't help but reflect on the past. How much of my life had been devoted to him, to making sure he had everything he needed, to giving him every opportunity I never had. I had always put him first, always sacrificed, but it was never enough. I remembered the early days when I worked 2 jobs, coming home exhausted just to see him smile and tell me about his day. I gave up my dreams to help him pursue his. I never asked for anything in return. And yet, here we were. I thought back to the first time he asked for money. I had handed it over without question, trusting him. He said it was for something important, but I later found out it was for something frivolous. That moment stung. It was the beginning of the slow realization that I wasn't as important to him as I had thought. "Jalen," I whispered to myself, looking at him with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I gave everything for you, and this is how you repay me?" I didn't want to back down. I couldn't. This wasn't just about money or assets. It was about respect, about my dignity. I stood up and walked over to the drawer where I had kept everything. The documents from my lawyer, the amended will, the evidence I had gathered. I placed the papers on the table in front of Jalen, watching his expression change as he looked at them. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't expecting this. I wasn't the same woman who had been manipulated all these years. "This is the last time you try to control me," I said firmly. "You'll never manipulate me again." Jalen's face turned red. His eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and desperation. He didn't know how to respond. I wasn't the woman he had tried to intimidate. I had drawn a line, and this time he couldn't cross it. "Mom, you don't know what you're doing," he hissed, his voice tight with frustration. "You'll regret this. You're making a mistake." I stood my ground, my eyes locking with his. No, Jalen, you've already made the mistake. I watched as he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of relief. But it wasn't a clean relief. It was the relief of knowing I had stood up for myself. But the battle wasn't over yet. Just as I was processing the weight of the confrontation, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. I picked it up, my pulse quickening. "Hello?" I said, unsure of what to expect. "Mrs. Johnson?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but calm. "This is Stan from Pierce & Sons law firm. I have some news that might change everything." My heart skipped a beat. "What news?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's something you need to know," Stan continued, his tone serious. "Something that could alter everything you've planned for." A cold chill ran through me. What was it? What was going to happen next? The sun was setting outside, casting a golden glow on the windows. I sat in my living room, staring out into the quiet street, the weight of my recent decisions hanging heavily on me. I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling around my head. Had I done the right thing? Was cutting Jalen off completely the right move, or had I gone too far? I felt a mix of emotions, regret, guilt, and a gnawing sense of uncertainty. I had always given everything for my children, especially Jalen. He'd always been my golden child, the one I worked tirelessly for, the one I never questioned. But now, everything felt like it had been one big lie. I had sacrificed so much. For years, I had put his needs before mine, made sure he had what he wanted, even when I didn't have much to give. And this is how he repaid me, by trying to take everything I had worked for, everything I had built. But deep down, I knew I'd made the right choice. I couldn't keep living my life under his shadow. I couldn't keep letting him manipulate me. No matter how much it hurt, I had to stand my ground. As I sat there, lost in thought, I heard the doorbell ring. My heart skipped a beat. I already knew who it was. I hesitated before getting up, but as I reached for the door, I steeled myself. This time would be different. I wouldn't let him walk over me anymore. When I opened the door, Jalen stood there, his hair disheveled, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Please, I was wrong. I want to fix this. Can we talk?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to let his charm get to me. I knew this game, the same game he'd played countless times before, the guilt trips, the manipulation. But I was done. "No," I said, my voice steady. "We're not going back to what it was, Jalen. I won't be manipulated by you anymore. Not this time." His face twisted in confusion, then anger. "Mom, you don't understand. I'm just trying to protect you. I've always had your back, and now you're pushing me away." "Protect me?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been trying to control me. All this time, you've been using me for your own gain. I'm done." I saw the shift in him. The mask cracked for just a second. He didn't know how to respond. He had no control over this situation anymore. I stood my ground, not backing down. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. You're not the victim here. You never were. He flinched, but quickly tried to recover. But Mom, I'm your son. I've always been there for you. You're throwing away everything we've worked for. I've worked for it, Jalen, I said, my anger flaring. You've always taken. You've never given anything back, and I've had enough. For the first time in years, I saw him falter. His words, his manipulations, they didn't have the same power over me. I wasn't the same woman he had been able to control. The confrontation seemed to go on forever, but it was more than just a conversation, it was a reckoning. Jalen sat there, still trying to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty. He reminisced about the past, about how I had always been there for him. You always believed in me, Mum. Why are you turning your back on me now? You were the only one who ever supported me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. His words didn't affect me like they used to. They didn't have the power to break me anymore. Instead, they just made me angry. I stood up, facing him head on. You want me to believe that? After everything? After all the times you've lied to me, used me, manipulated me? No more, Jalen. I won't let you walk all over me any longer. I saw the rage flash in his eyes. His fist clenched, his jaw tightened. But I wasn't scared anymore. He had no power over me. I've been putting you first for too long, I said, the words feeling like a weight lifting off my chest. And all you've done is take. I've let it go for too long, but not anymore. Jalen stood up from the couch, his face turning red with anger. You don't get it, Mom, he spat. You think you're the only one who knows how to survive. You think you can just take everything back like it's nothing. I'll make sure you regret this. His words were empty threats. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I had nothing left to lose. I crossed the room, walked over to the drawer where I kept the important papers, and pulled out the envelope. I dropped it on the table in front of him, watching as he looked at the documents with disbelief. This is it, Jalen, I said, my voice cold. You're not in control anymore. I've already made sure my assets are protected. I've made the changes I needed to. You're not the beneficiary anymore. You've lost. He stared at the papers, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might actually get it, that he might understand that I was done being his pawn. You think you can just take everything from me? He snarled. No, I said, meeting his gaze, unwavering. You've already taken enough. Now I'm taking back what's mine. The silence between us was thick, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me anymore. As Jalen stormed out, his face twisted with rage, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had stood up for myself. I had finally taken control of my life. But just as the tension started to ease, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I picked it up, my stomach tight. Hello? Mrs. Johnson? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but calm. This is Stan from Pierce & Sons law firm. I have some news for you. My heart skipped. What news? The situation has escalated. Jalen has filed a legal challenge against the changes to your will. He's not backing down. I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't over, but I wasn't backing down either. I was ready for the fight. I would not let him take what was mine. Not this time. The morning light barely broke through the curtains, and yet the day felt darker than it had in years. I sat in my living room, a cold cup of coffee in front of me, my hands shaking slightly as I opened the letter from my lawyer. The words blurred for a second, but when my eyes finally focused, the reality hit me like a slap across the face. Jalen had filed a motion to contest my will. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was a full-blown legal battle, and he was using everything he could to break me down. The letter outlined his threats, accusing me of acting irrationally and warning me that I couldn't carry out my plans without him. I felt a knot in my stomach. The fear was there, simmering beneath the surface, but it wasn't enough to stop me. This was it. This was the moment where I either stood up and fought for myself, or I let him win. Damn it, I muttered under my breath. I wasn't going to let him take everything from me. Not this time. Not anymore. Later that morning, I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, a million thoughts running through my mind. I had already made up my mind, but I had to hear it from my lawyer, hear that it was possible that I could take this to court. I dialed the number and waited as the phone rang. Gloria, the lawyer's voice came through. I've received Jalen's filing. He's serious about this. I'm not backing down, I said, cutting him off. I want to fight this. I'm taking it to court. There was a pause on the other end, as if he was gauging my seriousness. Gloria, this is going to be a long battle. Are you prepared for this? I'm done being a victim, I said, my voice stronger now. It's time to fight for what's mine. By the time dinner rolled around, I had made my decision. The family was gathered, their faces filled with uncertainty and quiet tension as I sat them down in the living room. I'm challenging Jalen's legal motions, I said, looking them all in the eye. I've given him enough chances. Now it's time to do what's right for me. The room was silent. A few exchanged uneasy glances. My sister, ever the peacemaker, was the first to speak. Gloria, think about this. You're putting everything at risk. You don't have to do this. Me, she said, her voice shaky. I shook my head. I've been living for everyone else for too long. I've put my life on hold for Jalen, for all of you. But now I have to live for myself. Some of them, like my sister, didn't understand. But I could see in others' eyes, like my son, that they supported me. This wasn't just about money or control. This was about me reclaiming my dignity, my strength. The evening had barely settled in when my phone rang again. The number was familiar, Jalen. I knew it wouldn't be good, but I answered anyway, bracing myself for the fight. Mom, he began, his voice dripping with frustration. You're throwing everything away. You're making a huge mistake. I took a deep breath, my anger rising. No, Jalen, you're the one who's been throwing everything away, not me. This is my life, my decision. You think you're going to win this? He shot back. You think you can fight me? You're making a huge mistake, and you'll regret it." His words were empty threats, but they hit me in a way I didn't expect. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, the desire to stand my ground, to not back down, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of losing him. "You'll never break me," I said, my voice steady and firm. "This is my life. I'm done letting you control me." He hung up before I could say anything else, and the silence that followed was deafening. The next day, I sat in my lawyer's office, papers scattered around me as we prepared for the fight ahead. I had already decided I wasn't going to back down. This was my fight, my moment to take control of everything I had worked for. "I've spent my whole life taking care of others," I said, looking at my lawyer with a steely resolve. "Now it's time to take care of myself." My lawyer handed me the final documents to sign, the ones that would officially start the legal process. I could feel my heart beating faster, but there was no fear, only a sense of finality. With one last look at the papers, I signed them. This was it, the first step in a long fight, but I wasn't looking back now. Later that evening, as I sat in my living room, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, it was Miss Eleanor, an old family friend I hadn't seen in years. "Gloria," she said softly, stepping inside. "I've been watching everything that's happened, and I want to help." She told me she had been quietly observing how Jalen had treated me over the years, how he had taken advantage of me. "I've seen how they've treated you. You've earned the right to stand up for yourself," she said, her voice full of conviction. But there was more. "Miss, Eleanor revealed that she had evidence that could tip the scales in my favor. But using it, she warned, would come with its own set of challenges. Do you trust me?" she asked, her eyes steady, full of hope and concern. I didn't know what to say. I was grateful, but the risks involved made me hesitate. Could I really trust her? Could I trust this information? But it was the break I had been waiting for. As I stood at the door, looking at the key to my potential victory in my hands, I knew one thing for sure. This was my chance. But was I ready to take it? The early morning light was soft, casting long shadows across my bedroom. I stood in front of the mirror, my fingers trembling slightly as I adjusted my dress. Today was the day. Today, everything I had worked for would either collapse or come to fruition. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. This wasn't just about money. It was about my dignity, my autonomy, my life. As I tied my shoes, memories flashed through my mind. How did I get here? How had I let things go on for so long? I had given Jalen everything, sacrificed myself for years. And now I was standing at the precipice of it all about. To challenge him, challenge everything that I had built. I inhaled deeply, letting the breath steady me. I could feel the tension in my chest. But there was something else too, a quiet resolve. I've fought this long. I can't back out now, I whispered to myself. In my hand, I held the letter from my lawyer. It was a reminder of why this fight mattered, why I couldn't back down. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for the respect I'd never been given. And I wasn't going to let Jalen or anyone else take that away from me. The courthouse loomed ahead as I walked toward the entrance. The sun was high now, but the air was thick with tension. I could feel it in my bones. I wasn't alone in this fight, but it certainly felt that way. When I stepped out of the car, I saw him, Jalen. He stood with his arms crossed, glaring at me as if I were the enemy. "Mom," he sneered, "you really think you're going to win this?" I didn't flinch. I met his gaze, my eyes hardening. "You see, Jalen, you see who's been right all along," he scoffed. And I could hear the venom in his voice. He wasn't done trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of anyone. As I walked past him and his allies, their judgment hung in the air. They whispered, they watched, but none of them could stop me. I had spent my life being the dutiful mother, the silent one, the one who always gave in. Not today. Today, I was taking my stand. The courtroom was cold, its walls echoing with the quiet hum of anticipation. I sat at the defendant's table, trying to steady my nerves. Jalen's lawyer was smooth, slick, and confident, leaning back in his chair like he had already won. But I wasn't here to lose. The judge called the court to order, and my lawyer stood up, a determined look on his face. "We're ready, Your Honor," he said. But what happened next took me completely by surprise. As soon as the trial began, my lawyer dropped a bombshell. "We've uncovered new evidence," he declared, holding up a piece of paper. "This document is key to proving Gloria's case. It exposes what Jalen has been hiding." The courtroom fell silent as the judge's face grew serious. The evidence was undeniable. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. This could be the turning point. But Jalen wouldn't go down without a fight. He never did. The tension in the room thickened when Jalen's lawyer stood up, presenting new evidence that could potentially invalidate everything. My heart sank as the paper was placed before the judge. It was a document that bore my signature, one I had never seen before. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Jalen's lawyer smirked. "This is what happens when you challenge me," he said, looking at me with an arrogant gleam in his eye. "You think you can outsmart me?" I froze, my pulse racing. How had this happened? I had never signed such a document. I fought the panic that rose in my chest. Stay calm. Stay calm. There was still a way out of this. I couldn't let Jalen win. My lawyer sprang into action. "Objection!" he said quickly, his voice sharp. "We question the validity of this document." The judge nodded, agreeing to investigate further. For a moment, I let myself breathe. This wasn't over yet. As the hours passed, the courtroom was a blur of heated exchanges. But when it was finally my turn to speak, I stood up with a calm I hadn't known I had. I told the court my story, speaking from the heart. I wasn't reading from a script. I was telling the truth. My voice was steady, and the words rang clear in the silence of the room. The judge and jury were listening. Then I revealed the unexpected piece of evidence, something no one had anticipated. a hidden recording of a conversation between Jalen and his lawyer, discussing how they planned to use my trust against me. I had saved it, knowing that one day I might need it. "This is the truth," I said firmly. "No amount of lies will change it." For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't just the victim in this story, I was the one telling it. I was the one who had taken back the narrative. The judge's gavel echoed in the room as he called for a short recess. My heart was pounding in my chest. I had exposed the truth, but now the waiting game began. I had no idea what the verdict would be. I sat in the defendant's chair, my hands trembling slightly as I waited for the judge to return. The tension in the room was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The judge finally returned and looked at both sides. "I will deliberate," he said. "My final decision will be announced shortly." My stomach churned, and I couldn't stop the thoughts racing through my mind. Was this it? Had I done enough? I didn't know, but I did know one thing. I had fought for myself, and no matter what happened next, no one could take that away from me. I stood there in the courtroom, heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the final moment. My eyes locked onto Jalen and his lawyer, the very people who had spent so much time trying to tear me down. I could hear the sounds of the courtroom fading into a dull buzz as the weight of everything I had fought for settled on my shoulders. I had been silent for so long, invisible in my own family. Today, I was done. I've been invisible for far too long. I whispered to myself, finding strength in the words. This ends today. I could feel my fist clenching, the familiar tension running through me. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. This fight was bigger. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and showing my family the woman I truly was. A woman who wasn't going to stand by and be silenced any longer. The room fell still as the judge prepared to deliver his ruling. I was ready. There was no turning back now. Jalen's lawyer stood up, confident as ever, and introduced the last piece of evidence. He had another document, one that could destroy everything I had worked for. The courtroom went quiet, all eyes on the paper as it was handed to the judge. My heart skipped a beat. The document bore my signature, and for a moment, panic clawed at my chest. Was this another one of Jalen's tricks? A desperate attempt to sabotage me? "You don't know who you're dealing with," Jalen's lawyer said, his tone dripping with smugness. "This is over." I couldn't let him see my fear. I focused on my breathing, steadying myself. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going down without a fight. I glanced at my lawyer, and he gave me a reassuring nod. "Objection, Your Honor," he said firmly. "We need to investigate this document further." "It doesn't add up," the judge agreed, calling for a short recess while the authenticity of the document was reviewed. The tension in the room was unbearable, but for the first time in this entire battle, I felt a small spark of hope. When the judge returned, the room was deathly silent. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. The judge held up the forged document, his eyes scanning it as he addressed the court. "After reviewing this document, It's clear that it has been tampered with, he declared. This is not only an attempt to deceive, but a violation of trust. This document will be disregarded. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was it. This was the moment when everything changed. The lies, the manipulation, everything was being exposed. I stood taller, my heart racing, but my voice steady. I wasn't the victim anymore. I had taken back control. The judge continued, his voice unwavering. This case is no longer about inheritance, it's about integrity. Gloria's rights will be upheld. I could hardly believe it. For the first time, the truth was on my side. Jalen's smug expression twisted into a scowl, and for a moment I saw the anger flash in his eyes. He knew he had lost, but Jalen wasn't done. He wasn't one to give up so easily. As the judge prepared to finish the proceedings, Jalen stood up, his voice rising in desperation. "You think this is over?" Jalen shouted, his hands shaking with rage. "I'll fight you till the end, Mom. You can't win this." The courtroom fell silent once again, but this time I didn't flinch. I had heard it all before: his threats, his lies, his manipulation. The judge's voice was firm as he addressed Jalen. "This is your final opportunity, Jalen. You had your chance. The decision has been made." My heart surged with triumph. The judge had spoken. It was over. Jalen's manipulations had failed. He had no more power over me. I locked eyes with him as he glared at me, his face red with fury. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I knew that this was the end of the battle and the beginning of my freedom. The moment of truth arrived as the judge read the final verdict. The courtroom was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. "Gloria," the judge began, his voice steady, "the court rules in your favor. The inheritance is yours. The actions of the defendant have been exposed, and the evidence shows that they were intended to manipulate and deceive." The weight of the words hit me like a wave. I had won. I had done it. The judge turned to me with a nod. "You've earned this, Gloria." I felt a rush of relief and triumph flood through me. I had spent so long feeling small, overlooked and controlled. But today I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my place in this world. As my lawyer smiled at me, I knew that this wasn't just a legal victory. This was a victory for me for everything I had endured and everything I had fought for. I stood up, my hands trembling, but my heart steady, and walked out of the courtroom. The weight of the past was lifting, and I felt a strength I had never known before. But as I glanced back at Jalen, his face twisted in anger, I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. He wasn't going to stop trying to take what wasn't his. But for now, I had won. For now, I had broken free. The day after the trial, I sat in my living room, staring at the walls, the quiet feeling both comforting and unsettling. It was over. Jalen had lost. My lawyer had confirmed the ruling my inheritance was rightfully mine, and Jalen's manipulation had been deemed fraud. The weight of it all hung in the air, but the house, surprisingly, felt lighter. There was a sense of relief, yes, but also something else, an emptiness. I reached for the phone when it rang. It was my lawyer again. "This is a win, Gloria," he said. "But it's just the beginning. Your real battle is the one with your family." His words echoed in my mind. I had won in court, but what would the rest of my family think? I'd taken something from them, even though it was mine to begin with. I stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the world beyond. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over it. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about me, my dignity, my peace of mind. But I knew the real challenge was still to come. The family I had fought so hard to protect might never accept me as the person I had become. They'd never understand why I had to fight so hard. But I wasn't afraid anymore. The phone rang again, breaking the silence. "Jalen." My heart sank, but I didn't hesitate to answer. "Mom." His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get this far. Can we talk?" I had to force myself to listen, but as his words washed over me, I felt something I hadn't expected. Sadness, maybe even pity, but no longer love. I stayed calm, my voice steady. "It's too late for..." "Apologies, Jalen. I fought too hard for my peace. There's nothing you can say that will change that." There was silence on the other end, then a bitter laugh. "You'll regret this, you know. I'm your son." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The past was gone. The family I had dreamed of, the one I had worked so hard to hold together, was no more. I couldn't change that. As I hung up, a wave of finality washed over me. The past was behind me now. Later that afternoon, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, sifting through old family photos. The weight of everything I'd been through was still there, but now it was a weight I was ready to carry. I came across a picture of my late husband, smiling, proud of the life we had built. And then there were the memories, so many years spent giving everything to my family, asking for nothing in return. I paused, running my fingers over the photo. But something in me had shifted. I was no longer that woman, the one who put everyone else first, who never asked for anything. Then I found it, a letter from my mother, written years ago. She had always been my guide, even after she passed. The words on the page were a reminder of everything she had taught me. "You are more than just a caretaker, Gloria. Never forget that." I read it over and over, the words sinking in deeper each time. This was what I had forgotten. I wasn't just a mother, a wife, a caretaker. I was me. I had the right to take control of my life, to make decisions for myself. I made the decision then. I would start fresh. The house, the belongings, the memories, they were part of a life that no longer served me. I would give them away, donate what I didn't need, and keep only what mattered. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. The air was thick with discomfort. They tried to act normal, but I could feel the tension. Some of them offered shallow congratulations. Others were cold. "We didn't think you'd go this far, Gloria," one of them said. You didn't have to take everything. I looked around the table, seeing their judgment, the resentment simmering beneath the surface. But I didn't flinch. I didn't take anything, I said quietly. I just took what was always mine. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt a stab of loneliness. But it was different this time. I wasn't seeking their approval anymore. The victory had been mine, and it would remain mine. They didn't understand, and maybe they never would. But I had come to accept that. The next morning, I went for a walk in the park. The sun was warm on my face, and the weight of the past seemed to be slowly lifting. I had fought for so long, but now I was walking towards something new. As I walked, I noticed a woman sitting on a bench. We exchanged a glance, and she smiled, a knowing smile that said everything without saying a word. She had been through her own battles, I could tell. "It's never too late to start over," she said, her voice soft but sure. Her words resonated with me in a way I didn't expect. I wasn't just walking away from the past. I was walking toward a new beginning. I was ready to build a life that was truly mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free to make choices, free to live for myself, free from the chains that had bound me for so long. As I continued walking, I realized that I wasn't just stepping into a new chapter. I was creating my own story.